Hi, Carrie.
Hi.
My name is Carrie Lou. I'm the Assistant Dean of Professional Development. And on behalf of our Office of Professional Development, I'm sure you know of us. We get tons of emails, we get many workshops and all that stuff. That's good. Our team is one with you, who was just up here, Assistant Director of Professional Development from Mal Goyano, Career Services Advisor, and Grace Park is in the overflow room in MO and NYF 204. Just a little bit about our department. We provide career services to students and alumni to help you develop the skills and outlets that you need in today's society, right, in today's economy, so that you're at your optimal best, your job-ready best into the job market. We do this through workshops, through employer information sessions, on interviewing skills, etc. Okay. Some of you know about the non-traditional opportunities, where we try to create internships and jobs to broaden the job market in industries that may not normally hire social workers.
Welcome, San Diego.
San Diego.
Welcome, San Diego. Hi, San Diego. Can you mute your microphone, please?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So again, like I said earlier, we also invited students from the Virtual Academic Center. Once here live in person. But people are joining us on the webcast, JC, San Diego Academic Center, Orange County Academic Center, and then the other schools of social work in the area, UCLA, Cal State Long Beach, Cal State Northridge, Cal State LA, and Cal State Dominican Hills. So there's an overflow room in MRF 204. So direct from Sacramento, California, you'll be hearing from the executive officer, Kim Madsen, and her team about the California LCSW license requirements, navigating the LCSW licensing process, additional coursework that may be needed, collecting hours, etc. They'll also give you an update on the LCSW exam restructure. Okay? Someone needs to be muted on that end?
Well, I think we're good to go up here.
Okay. Because we have so many participants and venues joining us today, we ask that you hold all of your questions until the end. For those of you that are not here in this room, you're going to be emailing your questions to sswce@usc.edu. Okay? And Carmel's taking questions up there, or back there, and she'll be assisting us on that. We're recording this presentation, and it'll be archived on YouTube within the next couple of weeks. So be looking out for that link. We'll send that out as well. So I want to thank Kim and her team for presenting today. This is, I think, the third time we've done this.
Yeah, it is.
Third time, but at your suggestion, thank you. We invited our other school partners, so we can't see them, but we hope they're out there, and we thank them for joining us as well. So I pass it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. It's nice to be with you again. I'm Kim Madsen. I'm the Executive Officer for the Board of Behavioral Sciences. And seated to my left is the entire social work unit. To my left is Darlene York. She is the social work examination analyst. To her left is Melissa Lara. She is also the social work examination analyst. And then to Melissa's left is Trish Winkler. She is the individual that will review all the associate social worker in registration applications. And so I'm going to turn the presentation over to these ladies, and they'll walk you through the process. And then at the end, if you have questions, we'll be happy to answer those questions. And I know, Carrie, you talked about a little bit about the exam restructure, and we can talk about that at the end of the presentation. So I'll turn it over to these capable ladies.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Can everyone hear us clearly? Can you raise your hand if you can hear us? Okay, my name is Darlene, and we're going to go over navigating the LCSW licensing process in a nutshell. I'm going to kind of just expound a little bit on, just cover a little bit what the typical process is. First of all, you're going to get your MSW from an accredited school or university. You're going to register with the BBS as an associate clinical social worker. You're going to gain your supervised postmaster's work experience, and you're going to complete any required additional coursework. You're going to apply for the LCSW examination eligibility. You're going to pass the LCSW standard written examination, and then you're going to pass the LCSW clinical vignette examination. Ultimately, your end goal is to get your official clinical social work license. Okay, so at this time I'm going to turn it over to Melissa Lara. She's going to walk you through the process of getting your ASW. At the end of her presentation, she's going to give me the floor back, and I'm going to walk you through gaining your experience in the state of California. Okay, thank you, Melissa.
Okay. Hi, as Darlene stated, my name is Melissa Lara. I was the ASW evaluator for the past 2 years. Trish took over starting January, so I'm going to explain the process for you. But Trish Winkler will be evaluating all the ASW applications. So to start off, the application is a pretty simple application. It just consists of now 2 pages. It's been revised, but it just has a few simple questions on there. You're going to fill in your address as well, and I just want to make you aware that the address is public information, so a lot of people choose to use a P.O. box or their employer's address because it does get posted to our website on our online license verification. You will also need official transcripts. Your degree does need to be posted on there, and the transcript should be submitted in the university's business sealed envelope. You will also need to do your live scan fingerprints, and the fee is $75. There has been a new requirement, which is the California Law and Professional Ethics. This requirement became effective January 1st, 2014, but all of our MSW programs at California universities, they're all compliant, so there's no need to do anything in addition to your degree. By us seeing that you graduated from one of our California universities, you are compliant. That's all we need. So a couple things about the application processing time. The processing time can be pretty lengthy during graduation season. We ask that you allow 60 working days for us to process your application. If you want to know it's received, it's best to send it certified mail with some type of tracking feature, because we cannot go through all the applications to see when every single one was received. So you can consider doing that, or send in a self-addressed stamped envelope, and we will date stamp that so you know what date your application was received. If you want to know if your registration has been issued before you get anything in the mail, we always post it immediately onto our online license verification, so you can use that feature on our homepage under Quick Hits, and you can just search by your name. If nothing shows up, you weren't issued a registration number. But as soon as your name appears, then that means you were issued a registration number. So you can check that before receiving anything in the mail. It might be there first, a few days sooner. So then once you become registered, you do need to renew every year, because if there's any lapses, we will not count any hours during those times. Also, we will not count any hours until the issue date of your ASW registration number. There is 5 additional coursework requirements, but that is not required until you're ready to apply for licensure after all your hours have been gained. Some of those additional coursework requirements may have been embedded in your degree program. So if you want to go to our board's website under applicants, then schools, you can find your school, click additional courses required, and it'll list which courses in your degree program may have satisfied our requirements. I think that is about it for the ASW registration. I'll hand you off to Darlene, and she will talk about gaining hours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Melissa. Okay, I want to take this opportunity to thank all of you for joining our presentation today. You know, it's unfortunate that we don't have the means, which we had in the past, to go out and visit the schools. So this is the next best thing that we can accommodate you with. So, okay, so I'm going to go over the required supervised work experience. And this is something that all applicants must meet in order to be approved to sit for our examinations. Okay, so in addition to your degree and the additional coursework, you are required to accrue a significant amount of work experience. So you need 3,200 hours of supervised work experience and 104 supervised weeks. Keep in mind these are two separate requirements. Both the supervised week experience and the weeks of supervision are broken down into categories, and we will get to that in a few minutes. Your experience must be gained under the supervision of a licensed mental health professional. And I'm not sure if everybody down, yes,
Darlene, can you repeat that section again, please?
Okay.
They're just chopping in and out.
okay, so let me move the mic a little. And that's not it?
No,
Okay.
you just have to speak up.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, so all applicants are required to gain 3,200 hours of work experience and 104 supervised weeks. Okay, these are two separate requirements, so they can be done simultaneously. Weeks of supervision. That's where you sit down with your supervisor and you have a one-on-one discussion of what you've accomplished that week or what your goals are for that week. Okay, so we're going to give you, okay, can you hear me? Okay,
Now,
so,
one more time, sorry.
okay.
And then also, if you have questions, don't forget to email sswce@usc.edu. Sorry, go
Okay.
ahead.
Okay. 3,200 hours of work experience and 104 supervised weeks. Can you hear me?
I think it was 3,200 hours.
Of work
and
experience.
104 supervised hours per week.
No,
Not the 3,200 hours.
Okay.
104.
Okay, let me finish giving you this first, and then we'll come back to the Q&As, and you can we'll be a little bit, we'll expound on each of those requirements. Okay. Okay. So again, 3,200 hours of work experience. This can be gained anywhere from the moment you apply for your registration all the way through licensure. Okay. Okay. So your experience must be gained under the supervision of a licensed mental health professional. And I'm going to give you a list of the following acceptable licensed health professionals. You can either be supervised by a licensed clinical social worker. They must meet the current requirements, which is a 15-hour supervision course and hold a valid license. Another one is the marriage and family therapist. They must be licensed for 2 years.
Additional voice, right? Okay. And then it's chopping, it's coming in and out.
Okay, so I'm not,
that's not us. Let me run and go find Ryan.
okay.
Go ahead.
Maybe, should I keep going?
Keep going and just speak louder and I'll go find
Okay.
Ryan.
San Diego, did they use their? Can you bring the microphone?
Okay, it's there, it's your connection. Yes, our connection, we can hear you fine.
Okay.
Okay. Would you like me to keep going, or would you like me to pause for a moment?
No, you can keep going. Is there a way to put your microphone closer?
Okay, there's a lot of movement in the background, and that probably is part of the problem. We're hearing a lot of feedback.
Is there a way for us to get muted?
So we don't,
So we only unmute when we have a comment?
Yeah, that would be perfect.
That would help. Okay, now, if you can hear me, raise your hand, because I don't want to keep going if you can't hear me. Okay, thank you, then I will keep going. Okay, so let me just kind of reiterate what I had said earlier about the work experience. Okay, so every applicant is going to be required to do 3,200 hours of work experience. Okay, and then you need 104 supervised weeks. These are two separate requirements. In order to gain this experience, you must be under the supervision of a licensed professional mental health provider, either a licensed clinical social worker, which must complete the 15 hours of the supervision course and hold a current valid license. Another, the marriage family therapist must be licensed for 2 years, complete a 15-hour supervision course, and hold a valid license. The licensed professional clinical counselor must be licensed for 2 years, complete a 15-hour supervision course, and hold a valid license. The other two would be the licensed psychologist must be licensed for 2 years and hold a valid license. Does not need to complete the 15-hour supervision course. Lastly, the licensed physicians. The MD must be nationally board certified in psychiatry, must be licensed for 2 years and hold a valid license. They also do not need to do the 15-hour supervision course. So for a detailed list of the requirements, please visit the website. You can download the responsibility statement of supervisors for clinical social workers, associate clinical social workers. There's a list of what would make them meet the requirements. Another place is in our statutes and regulations, which can be found from the home page under the Quick Hit sections. We ask that you would always check your supervisor's license. You can go anonymously on the website onto the online license verification feature. All you need is either their first and last name or their license number. You can do this through the Breeze system. Okay, now we're going to go back and talk about the 104 supervised weeks and the work experience and the categories. Let's start with the 104 weeks of supervision. Any week in which an ASW participates in 1 hour of individual supervision or 2 hours of group supervision counts as one supervised week. Of your 104 weeks of supervision, 52 weeks must be weeks in which you must meet with your supervisor in an individual setting or for at least 1 hour. Okay, of the 52 required weeks of the individual supervision, at least 13 weeks must be with the LCSW supervisor. The remainder can be done in group. The purpose of the supervision is so that the work experience you are gaining would count towards your hours toward licensure. You will need to be supervised in order to accrue work experience. So you will be completing the 104 supervised week requirements and the 3,200 hours of work experience requirements simultaneously. You must obtain both requirements to be eligible for examination. Do you have a question? Okay, should I keep going? Raise your hand, please, if I should keep going. Okay, thank you.
Interest, I love it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now let's go down to and by the way, I'm sorry, but I neglected to mention we're reading this from the Navigating the LCSW licensing process, and this could be downloaded from our website. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the 3,200 hours of work experience. Okay, thank you. The 3,200 hours of supervised work experience breaks down into different categories. Okay, the first category is the clinical psychosocial diagnosis, assessment, and treatment, including individual or group psychotherapy counseling. You need a minimum of 2,000 hours in this area. And within that 2,000 hours, 750 hours must be with face-to-face individual or group psychotherapy. 1,200 hours could be claimed under client-centered advocacy, consultation, evaluation, and research. No more than 1,200 hours can be counted in that group. Of the required 3,200 hours of work experience, 1,700 hours must be gained under the supervision of an LCSW. The remaining 1,500 hours can be gained with the other type of licensees. Okay, and we've already gone over those. That would be the MFT, the psychologist, the MD, or the LPCC. You need to have at least 1 hour of direct supervisor contact to count any work experience in any given week. 1 hour of direct supervisor contact can be can be either 1 hour of individual supervision or 2 hours of group supervision. So for every 2 hours of group supervision that you might receive in 1 week, you can claim 1 week. And that would allow you to gain up to 40 hours a week work experience. So you either need 1 hour of individual or 2 hours of group. With that supervision, you can gain up to 40 hours a week work experience, and you can have up to 10 face-to-face hours of psychotherapy. If for some reason you need to perform an additional hour of face-to-face, maybe a coworker has gone on vacation, you're taking on their caseload, well, now you're looking at having 15 hours of face-to-face. Well, at that point, you're going to need additional supervision. You're going to need either another hour of group supervision or 2 more hours of, 1 hour of individual supervision or 2 more hours of group. And if for some reason you're in 2 separate settings, let's say you have a 20-hour job here, 20 hours here, and in each setting you're working within the scope of practice, you're gaining your experience. Well, now you need an hour of supervision for each setting. And if each setting is requiring that you have over 10 hours of face-to-face, again, you need additional supervision for each setting. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah.
Keep going
Okay.
to the end.
Yeah.
Okay,
Sorry,
thank you.
ma'am.
Okay. Okay, so to view the definition of psychotherapy, that is on our website in the statutes and regs. Okay, so we already went to the, if you go over. Okay, so the forms you're going to need at the time you begin your supervision, you should have all downloaded a set of 3 forms. One is the clinical social work experience verification form. The other is a supervisory plan. And the other is the responsibility statement of supervisors of an associate clinical social worker. Every supervisor that you're going to come across throughout the duration of your experience will need to have a set of these forms. Okay, there's another form that you might want to download for your benefit, and that would be the weekly tracking log. This tracking log is something that you would maintain your own hours and weeks in, and it's something that you want to kind of log for yourself. You're not going to submit the logs back to us. We want for every supervisor the set of 3 forms. Okay, so at the end of your supervision, when you have your 104 weeks and 3,200 hours of work experience, now you're ready to apply for examination. At that point, you would go to the website and download the LCSW Examination Eligibility Application. Right now, it's approximately 16 pages. You will need to go through the entire application and go through the checkoff list. You want to make sure that when you submit your application for licensure, that you have a complete application. And if you have any questions on what a complete application is, go through the checkoff list. And we ask that you would go through the most frequently asked questions relating to associate clinical social workers. All our information is on the website. Everything can be found under the LCSW, ASW related topics. The examination at this point is $200 to submit your application for licensure. Once you're approved to sit for the exam, then you go into the exam cycle. You must remain in the exam cycle until you pass both exams. That means you're eligible to test at least twice a year, but you must test at least once a year. If you fail to sit for any exam within your 1-year time frame, your file would be considered abandoned and will close it. That means you're going to have to reopen your file and you're going to have to meet the current requirements. At this point, there's one thing I want to let everybody know, that sometimes it's not always feasible to collect those hours with their first registration number. And this is where the 6-year rule comes in, and you're going to hear a lot about this. Okay, the 6-year rule is, there's actually a couple. One is your registration number is good for 6 years. it doesn't typically take someone 6 years to accomplish, their end goal, but sometimes it does. Life happens, you raise a family, whatnot, and you have to put that on hold. That means later on you decide to pick it up and you start counting your hours again. What happens is when you do not submit all your prior hours and you submit later hours, the board is only going to accept the most recent 6 years of your experience. So, unfortunately, what happens at the end, at the back end, is you start losing those older hours. So we would suggest that at the moment you gain your experience, submit that to us. Let us get you into that exam cycle, and it's just a matter of taking the exam at least once a year. You want to capture those hours and hold on to them. At this point, I think I'm pretty much done on the hours and the work experience.
I'm going to mention one more thing about the 6 years. Just that if, say you register right out of your degree program and you decide not to pursue clinical social work, so you're not gaining hours, the clock's still running on the ASW number. It doesn't stop. You only get 6 years from the issue date, and that's it. But you are allowed to apply for a second registration number. So if those 6 years are up, you can always apply for a second registration number. You're going to be issued a brand new number and given a new 6 years. But the only difference with the second registration number is you're not allowed to work in private practice, under supervision, of course, not until you're licensed. But that should be.
Yeah, you can't continue to work on that second registration number in any other setting. The private practice setting is not an option with a second registration.
Okay, and there's one more thing I'm going to add, because we do get a lot of questions about disclosing convictions. There is an frequently asked questions on our homepage under Quick Hits. It goes over the documents you'll need to submit, as well as what type of convictions need to be disclosed to our board, as well as processing times. So again, that's on our homepage under Quick Hits. You can review those frequently asked questions.
And as in addition to the criminal conviction information Melissa just gave you, sometimes what happens is individuals will have their convictions dismissed under Penal Code 1203.4, and they submit an application in the belief that they no longer need to disclose that conviction. That's incorrect. California law requires you to disclose that conviction, whether it's been expunged or not, if you are applying for license. So if in that situation, you've had your conviction expunged, please disclose it to us, because we will get it in the information anyway once we get the information back on your fingerprints.
Okay. So at this time, we're going to open the floor with the Q&As. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. We're here for you. We're available. And right now, the floor is yours. Yeah, no, I'm going to tell them about the Bible.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. But, questions from the audience here? Okay, we have a question in the back.
You cannot officially register for the ACSW without the official transcript. Is that correct? You can't register before?
Kim, I'm gonna ask you, Kim, when you guys answer the question, for everybody who's watching us via webcast, can you make sure that you answer the question, because nobody on the webcast can hear me.
Okay, the
And
question.
the rest over here. Did you
Right.
hear that question?
The question was, you can't submit your application for registration until you have official transcripts.
Correct.
And so to answer that, you can submit your application anytime. We're just not going to issue a registration to you until the application is complete. Part of a complete application is the criminal background clearance, which we obtain through the fingerprint process, and receipt of the official transcripts. So it's up to you. Some applicants like to get their application in the queue early. Some applicants like to wait till they have a complete package.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah,
Okay,
we
okay.
prefer a complete package.
Okay, well, I was just gonna say, we would prefer a complete package because it not only holds up the process of all the other applicants that do have a complete package, it also holds up the, process for you, because if you don't have a complete application, we're gonna see that it's incomplete, but we've already took time to evaluate part of it, but yet it stops right there. So when you do complete it, well, now we have to handle your application again. So it's not only pushing you out a few weeks, maybe a month, depending on how many applications we get at any given time. We would ask that you would submit a complete application. It's fair to everybody who's already waiting, and for those of you who, want to submit, it frees up the time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kim, I'm gonna ask you again because I'm realizing that they cannot hear us. Can you repeat the following and invite everybody who's joining us via webcast, if they have questions, to email the following address? You ready?
Okay, hang on.
Okay, so if you may wanna write it down,
I-
I'm gonna ask you
Oh, you
to
got it.
maybe remind people.
Okay.
Like every 10 minutes or something. So it's S like Sam, S like Sam, W, C like cat, E is in Edward.
And it stands for School of Social Work Continuing Education.
Okay,
sswce@usc.edu. If you can remind our viewers to please email their questions and we will ask them accordingly.
perfect. All right, for those of you that didn't hear that, email your questions to the following address. S is in Sam, S is in Sam, W as in Walter, C is in cat, E is in Edward, at usc.edu. All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we have a question from our audience here, and
Hi, I just wanted to know if you're at an organization that has an LCSW but doesn't have the 2 years of training. Do you go outside and look for a private consultant, or how does that work?
Okay, can you hear me?
repeat the question.
I will
Yeah.
repeat the question. Okay, you're asking if you can get supervision off-site. Okay, this is what we call off-site supervision. You want to know if you can get supervision from.
If I can clarify, so if you're at an agency, there is an LCSW there, but they don't have the 2 years of supervision experience. Can they use that LCSW, or do they have to get somebody outside?
They have to get somebody off-site.
So the
Okay.
question was, if you have an LCSW on site who does not meet the current supervisor requirements, can you obtain supervision outside of the site? And your
Okay, my response is yes, you can. However, this is something that has to be approved upon from your employer. That means the employer is going to have a letter of agreement / contract in place with the supervisor that you're having off-site. So everyone needs to be in agreement for the confidentiality of the client files. So this letter of agreement needs to be completed on the employer letterhead and needs to be signed by the employer, the supervisor, and by the associate. We want to see that everyone is in agreement and understands the extent of the law. Okay, so yes, so the answer to that is yes. Also, I might want to add.
Another question here, and then we have a webcast question. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually have two questions. One is, if you're at a place where they give you supervision, but they don't give you enough supervision. So can you combine, so you have one off-site supervisor if they agree to that, and one on-site supervisor? I mean, is that how it works? Because my job doesn't give me enough supervision. They
Okay.
give me some.
Okay. Go ahead.
So the question is, if you're not receiving enough supervision at your current location, are you able to obtain outside supervision to supplement that? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and the answer remains the same. Yes, you can, as long as there is a letter of agreement in place from the employer that's authorizing you to do this.
One more thing is you cannot count more than 40 hours in any given week, regardless of how much supervision you get.
Right. The other question is, can you guys cut out when you were saying the name of the 3 forms that we needed to download?
Okay, I'm going to repeat the names of the forms that
Thank you.
that you will need, that each supervisor will need to complete. The first two need to be completed before you start your supervision. And the first one would be the responsibility statement of supervisors of an associate clinical social worker. The purpose of this form is so that your supervisor is signing under penalty of perjury that they have met all these requirements. They need to meet these requirements before they take on the supervision role. And the second one that needs to also be completed is a supervisory plan. This is where you and your supervisor sit down and you guys have your objectives, your goals, and you want to complete those two before you start your supervision. Okay? Lastly, at the end of your supervision with each supervisor, you're going to complete the experience verification form. And this is where all your hours are documented. Again, they are signing under penalty of perjury that you have met all these requirements. Okay, and I have to really stress to everyone, the letter of agreements, the responsibility statements, and the supervisory plans, they need to be completed before you start your supervision. We often see that what happens later on is they might not be able to get that signature later. And what the unfortunate part is you won't be able to count your hours if we don't have these forms.
On your supervised work experience, I'm going to offer a word of caution. Always check the license of your supervisor, because we can only count hours of work experience. One, if you have a valid registration, and two, if your supervisor has a valid license. If your supervisor fails to renew the license and you've gained hours during the time the license wasn't valid, those hours will not be allowed and you will have to repeat them. So when you sign up with your supervisor, note the expiration of their license and then continue to check that on our website. Just so it takes so long to get these hours, it's devastating for me to tell applicants that I can't allow a year's worth of hours because the supervisor didn't have a valid license. So do your best to avoid that heartache.
And to that note, there is a guide for supervision. It can be found on the website under our forms and publications section, and it is a guide to supervision for associate clinical social workers. Please go to the website for all your forms. They are there.
Okay, so thank you. We have a question from our webcast, and then we'll go to you.
This is a two-part question. If I get licensed in another state and then move back to California, how does that work? And if I'm licensed here in California and move to another state, would I be able to practice in their hometown or in their home state?
Okay, the first question is, if I'm licensed in another state, can I practice in California? And then the second part of that question is, if I'm licensed in California and go to another state, how does that work?
Okay. Well, let's cover the first question. If you are licensed in another state, as it is right now, California does not have reciprocity. So, but being licensed in another state, if you are licensed at the highest level of licensure, and you've met California requirements such as the work experience and whatnot, you can apply to sit for California exams. At this time, California has its own exams, so you would not be able to practice in California until you became licensed in California. Now, as your second part of the question, can you practice in another state with a California license? Unfortunately, you'll need to check with each state as you decide which state you're going to. Each state is different, so that really is the determining factor for that state.
And this is sort of a nice segue into our plans to use the national exam for licensure. Effective January 1, 2016, we are going to use the Associate Social Work Board's national exam for licensure. So that'll be part one of your exam. And we are the 50th out of 50 states to begin using that. So that's going to help you move from state to state. The second part of your exam in California will be the California Law and Ethics. So that should ease portability for those of you that have that on your mind moving forward in your career.
Okay. Well, let's cover the first question. If you are licensed in another state, as it is right now, California does not have reciprocity. So, but being licensed in another state, if you are licensed at the highest level of licensure, and you've met California requirements such as the work experience and whatnot, you can apply to sit for California exams. And the second part of your exam in California will be the California Law and Ethics. So that should ease portability for those of you that have that on your mind moving forward in your career.
amount of time, you wanted to know how accurate our processing time is when I mentioned 60 working days. The application says to allow that amount. It doesn't mean that that is a set processing time. It varies depending on how many applications we receive. Right now it's an off season, so we can get applications in processed faster, numbers issued faster. Once everybody graduates May, June, we are inundated with applications and the processing time can even double. So you just can check the website. We do have, under our applicant tab, if you scroll all the way down, it'll tell you what date we're currently working on. So once you submit your application, you know when we received it. You can just check that processing time against your application's receive date to track when you might be issued a number.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If you're working through a temp agency, do those hours count towards
I'm going to answer
your
that.
hours? Basically, they're asking.
Oh. The question was, if you're working in a temp agency, do those hours count? We're aware of a situations where social work registrants are placed in correctional facilities to perform the work and gain their supervised hours. It's a challenge for us because who owns the records comes into play, who the supervisor is, and that's where the submission of the W-2 guides us. If your W-2 is from a temp agency, that's a challenge. If your W-2 is from the correctional facility, then there really isn't an issue in our mind. But you want to be really careful about that. Darlene, you want to?
Yeah, let me expound on that a little bit. Okay, the reason we say this is because we're seeing several applicants come in with 1099s. Our statutes and regs clearly state you cannot work on with a 1099. So unless your employer is paying you with a W-2 and we see a 1099, we're not going to accept those hours off the bat. Okay, and then you might have to go back to your employer and say, okay, well, we need a letter of agreement. One of the things with the staffing agency, there's no clients there. It's a staffing agency. So who are you serving? Okay, so if you're placed in a setting where you're seeing clients, well, then that letter of agreement has to come into play somewhere from the employer and the supervisor. Everybody seems to be at an off-site setting from the staffing agency. So really, again, be mindful of how you're being paid and who's paying you.
And for those of you that aren't aware of what a 1099 is, that's the tax form that is sent to individuals who typically work as an independent contractor, and the law prevents you from earning supervised hours as an independent contractor. You need to be either an employee or a volunteer.
Yes, we have a current active duty military serviceman who is planning to become licensed in California. However, this is post-service employment, so when he comes back to California. None of the social workers are licensed in California where he's maybe able to get supervision. So what are his options? Does he have to wait to get supervision when he comes back to California? He's basically asking if out-of-state licensed supervisors meet the quality standards to give him supervision.
Okay, the question was, an individual's in active military and will likely be obtaining supervised or hours outside of California. Will those hours count? Do the supervisors meet California standards?
Okay, so it's not uncommon that one would gain outside experience outside of California. So what we typically tell applicants is that you can gain out-of-state hours and weeks of experience. However, you must follow the guidelines from whatever state you're in. So if you're in Washington, Washington has its own states. You decide to move back to California and you want to count those hours, well then the supervisor would need to get them documented on our experience verification form, and then there's one more process though. You would need, the applicant would need to get their supervisor's license verified. There is a verification form within the application that would allow them to do that. But so it's not uncommon that someone from out of state would count their hours, and they are typically accepted as long as they are under a qualifying supervisor. And the guidelines are pretty much the same. Let me add another note. An applicant gaining experience outside of California does not need to be registered in California. They're following the guidelines from that state.
So it's quite possible you would he or she will have to register in that state where they're attempting to get their hours, but we would recommend that you contact that a regulatory board for their rules and regulations so that you're in compliance there.
Yes, because we will ask you for a verification of your registration or certification or license in another state also.
Can you repeat that email address again for our viewers?
You bet. It is S is in Sam, S is in Sam, W is in Walter, C is in Cat, E is in Edward, at usc.edu.
Thank you. Besides, we got a question here. Anybody else have a question here? Get your questions ready. So we'll go here. Do you have one? Okay, so we're gonna go here right now, and then we'll go to a webcast question. Go ahead.
She mentioned that the W-2 forms, do we have to submit that for the VPS or anything like that?
At the time you apply for licensure, you will need to submit W-2s with your hours. We want you have to be in a setting where you are either employed or volunteering.
And if you're volunteering and you're not getting paid, you just need a letter that states that you were a volunteer. And the question was, do you have to submit your W-2 forms with your application?
Thank you. Thank you for repeating the questions.
So what happens if you take the exam and do not pass the first time? Are there any kind of penalties?
No.
Yeah.
Is there any penalty for not passing the exam the first time? No. You're probably very disappointed,
Yeah.
but you have 1 year from that. Yeah, you have 1 year from that date to retake the exam. You do have to abide by the 180-day waiting period, but there are no penalties.
There is a fee though. They have to pay the testing fee.
Oh yeah, we're government. We want paper and we'll take money.
So, okay, another one. For fingerprints, are there designated sites for live scans, or can we obtain our live scan anywhere available?
Any live scan provider would work.
And the question was, are we able to get our fingerprints at any live scan provider, or are there designated sites? So yes, anywhere that does live scan will do it.
In California.
In California. If you're out of state, then you're looking at submitting the hard cards.
This question is from T-Sun. Not sure, since it takes 6 to 8 months to get your number, most jobs require that you have your number. So how do you suggest getting a job after graduation?
Let me clarify.
Okay. 6 to 8 months.
Okay. The question was, since it's 6 to 8 months to get your number, how do you prepare with that? And the jobs want you to have your numbers. Actually, let me clarify our processing times. The 60 days that Melissa referred to in the low peak season is actually for registration numbers that the graduates of the programs are going to be looking for to start the accumulation of your supervised hours. That takes, right now it's taking us about 60 days, or allow 60 days for that, but that is going to increase because not only is USC graduating students, so is every other social work program, so it does go up. And we have one individual here that looks at all of those applications, and that's Trish. And she's great, but volumes are tough to go, you're getting thousands of applications in a month. It gets kind of interesting. So that's one piece of it. The 6 to 8 month number that you referred to is for the exam eligibility application process, and that is the application that you will submit after you've earned all your supervised hours. And we've made some recent changes operationally in our office. We now have 2 full-time employees, Melissa and Darlene, looking at those applications. And in 5 weeks, we've moved our processing time significantly. About 5 weeks ago, they were looking at applications received in July. We're now looking at applications received in September. The other good news is that in the governor's budget for fiscal year 14-15, we have been approved for additional staff. 3 of the 8 positions are for licensing. We're in the process of hiring those positions now, and we are hoping to get those processing times across all of our applications significantly reduced here in the coming year. So hang with us a little bit longer and you'll see those processing times reduce. My guess, by the time you as graduates apply, that nightmare will no longer exist.
So, I was wondering if you could clarify the law and ethics requirement. You have a few questions from several schools wanting to know if they need to show proof that they've taken law and ethics before they apply. So maybe if you could just re-explain your requirements for law and ethics.
Okay.
There's a little bit of confusion.
The question was, there's confusion about the law and ethic requirements, and can we talk a little bit about that? What we did when that law, prior to that law going into effect, is that we contacted all of the California social work schools to ask them to identify where the law and ethics component was being taught, if it was a specific course or was it embedded throughout the whole degree program. And we're happy to tell you right now that all the California schools have responded that law and ethics is included in the program in some way, shape, or form. So as a graduate of any California social work school, this isn't a concern. The reason the law and ethics requirement was specifically called out is because of the examination restructure that is going to occur in 2016, and that requires students or first-time registrants to take the law and ethics exam within that first year of registration, and subsequently thereafter if you're not successful in the exam process. And we, as a regulatory board, cannot require you to take an exam if we cannot verify that you've had the course. And so that was the intent of the law change. And quite frankly, we knew it wasn't going to be a problem because all the graduates of the social work program were passing the first exam anyway. And that contained a lot of law and ethics questions. So we just needed the schools to point us to the coursework that contained all of that, and they did. So I hope that answers your question. It's not a worry.
Great. So several more questions. So this, we were having some technical difficulties when you were explaining this. Because did they hear it right? That 3,200 hours of work experience and 104 weeks of supervision can commence at the time of BBS/ASW application, not after verification of acceptance. So there's a little bit of confusion when they need the hours, before or after.
Okay, the question was a little confusion about the 3,200 hours and the 104 weeks, the supervision, and when you can start beginning that process. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay, good.
Okay, the process can begin the moment, the same day that you get your registration number. If you're in a setting that would allow you to gain your experience, the moment you get that ASW number posted to the website is the day that you could start counting your hours.
Excellent. And a follow-up question, the same person is this, can a family member who's an LCSW operate as a supervisor for their licensing hours?
The question is, can a family member who is an LCSW be a supervisor? And the answer to that is no. Sorry.
We have any other questions? We had a question here.
Do we have to stay at one company to get all our hours, or if we switch jobs, like how's that possible?
And the question is, do I have to stay at one company to get all of my hours?
And the answer is no. You're going to find that through the duration of your gaining your experience, you might have several different employers. We just want you to make sure that you get all your hours documented before you leave each employer's site. The reason I say this is because we often find it very difficult to get those hours proven later. And it's not uncommon that one supervisor might pass away you'll never get those hours signed off, and you can never have the employer sign for them. So we would ask that you would get all your supervision hours signed off before you leave each employment setting.
The other question is, at the time that they submit their hours, so when they got their hours from their supervisor, they were in good standing, the supervisor was in good standing. But at the time that they submitted, the application and everything, I guess the person fell out of good standing, would those hours still count?
The question is, if I have a supervisor who at the time I was gaining my supervised hours was in good standing, but at the time I submit my application, the supervisor is no longer in good standing, would my hours still count?
We're gonna count the hours where they had the valid license.
So yes, if at the time you gained your number of hours, your supervisor was in good standing, we will count those hours.
Can I add something about the ASW? Yeah, about the status update.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, before they go.
I just want to clarify, so what's the 4 forms again with every employer, right?
What was the question again?
The question was, those 4 forms that need to be filled out by, the employer, if you go to different employers, every time you move, every new employer have to fill out all those 4 forms?
Okay, the question is, the forms that are required for supervision and the supervisor, do I need a separate set of forms for each location I'm gaining hours, correct? Is that what you're asking? Okay, okay.
The answer is yes. So if you have one supervisor at 2 different settings, they need a set of forms for each setting. The only one they don't need is the responsibility statement, but you will need an experience verification form and a supervisory plan that would show that where you worked and where they worked. So there might be 2 different settings, so you need a set of 2 different forms.
Darlene, is it easier to think of it in terms of every time I have a different supervisor, I need to have a new set of forms?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, it would be.
You probably already answered this, but I'm gonna ask it again. So if there is no supervisor where I work, can I have off-site supervisor to fill in those hours, so they won't go to waste?
Right.
So,
The question was, if I don't have a supervisor at my current location, may I get another supervisor so I don't lose those hours?
The answer is yes, you can, and that's where the letter of agreement comes into play from the employer, the supervisor, and the associate. Everyone needs to be in agreement because of the confidentiality of the client files. You're sharing information with an off-site supervisor, that has to be authorized by the employer. So you want to make sure you get that letter of agreement in place.
and just, can you repeat, just so no one is wasting their time, another question came in, if I completed my MSW and submitted my application, do I need to wait for my registration number before I start my hours?
Okay, the question is, do I need to wait to start accumulating my hours until I get my ASW registration? Trish, you want to answer that?
Yes, you cannot work without that ASW registration number. So I wanted to add that unfortunately, we can't give status updates on your application. You're all gonna graduate at the same time, and you're all probably have job proposals, and so everybody calls and emails and wants a status update. And that's why we posted on our website those processing times. It just would take away from us processing our applications if we were to look up where your application was in that process. So we would appreciate it if you would give us that time to process the applications and just check the website.
Is it recommended when you mail your package in that you maybe get something, you certify it, or you get some trackable way to see at least you received it?
Yes.
Yeah, and the question was, is it recommended that you send your application in so that you're able to track the receipt of it by the board? And as Trish said, yes, and I'm gonna share that every year we have people who mail it in via regular mail, But because of the volume and because the mail all goes to a central location within Consumer Affairs, invariably applications get misdirected. We have no way of knowing that it even came or didn't come to our board, and then that means you have to start all over again. So the verification that we received it actually helps you, even if we don't get it, because it means you don't have to go to the back of the line anymore.
Good. We have a question in the back.
For the transcript, how do you want it sent and the whole process for everything?
Okay, the question.
You said, okay, go, sorry, go.
No, okay, the first question was how do we want to receive the transcripts?
And then like the second one was just like as a whole, do you want like the application sent electronically or what? How do you want it?
And as a whole, the second part of that question was, as a whole, did we want you to send the application electronically? So the answer to the first question is we want the transcripts in a sealed envelope from your school. That way, with the seal and all that makes it official. And then the second part of that question is, we're not taking applications electronically at this time. So hard copy, postage stamp, and send it in. And the check, yes.
And I know that many schools offer the electronic transcripts. We do not accept that either currently. So it does need to be a hard copy transcript, preferably attached to your ASW application, so it's all comes in at once.
With your degree posted. Like some people will send their last transcript and their degree is not posted on it, and we need that transcript with the degree posted.
Any other questions here? And I think we're good from the webcast as well.
Okay.
So we wanted to thank you for being here with us today. We know this is a privilege to have all of you take time out of your day directly from the Board of Behavioral Sciences to share this information with you. So thank you very much for doing this. We also want to thank everybody who's joined us from our various academic centers here at USC, and also all the schools that are joining us via webcast. We're very excited to be able to be that conduit. And we also are going to be recording. So this has actually been recorded, and we will send out the web link within the next couple of weeks. It'll be actually archived onto YouTube, and we will do that in a couple of weeks. And just a couple of things that I wanted to mention really briefly to all of our USC students, just reminders. Okay, but we can go ahead and DBS, we'll let you go.
Alrighty.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Carrie.
you.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.